Well, welcome and good evening, you wonderful dice. Of all alignments, I am Lunar D8, and this is part 13 of the unrehearsed creepypasta narration. The cell phone game. Howdy, you can call me Jack. It's not my real name, but that's what I'll go by for now. I reckon the time to tell my story has come. Believe it or don't, but here it is. I suggest you take away the lessons it teaches, even if you dismiss it all as bullshit, like 98% of other stories on the internet. But there's more truth in this story than any one of you could know. Now, I've been out of high school for 3 years, but that's when this particular event takes place. So I'm going to have to wind my clock back a little to tell this story. Originally, for my first 2.5 years of high school, I attended a school in the deep southern part of America, close to the Gulf. We had all kinds of ghost stories growing up, and if there was one lesson our super conservative parents taught us, it was this: don't go fooling around with things you don't understand. Now, I was really unpopular at my high school in the South. My first 2 years of high school were a real pain, because I was a big dork and everything made fun of me. I was a loner, and all I really did in class was play my Game Boy all day before rushing home to play an MMO I was addicted to. All that changed during my junior year, when my mother's job moved us out west. I started to attend a little Catholic high school with no more than around 250 students. It was at this time that I finally started to fit in and make friends. No one out here knew how much of a dork I was, so I opted to hide my power level, as they tend to say on /A/, and try to make friends for once in my life. Who knows? Maybe I could even get a cute girlfriend if I was careful. I started to meet people at the school, and at a school that small, you end up knowing everyone in your class. The first day, I made a new friend named Sam, and at lunch I opted to sit with him and his friends. He told me all about the other kids at the school, who was most popular, who the jocks were, so on and so forth. He introduced me to his friends, too. Jim, a big, jovial fellow who tipped the scales at 300 pounds. Vogelman, our table's resident computer nerd and hacker. And Thomas, a musician who played electric guitar. I also met Stephanie, the school's resident spunky Asian girl. Some of the guys said she could be a bitch, but she seemed cool enough. She was into gaming and never messed with any of us. She even seemed to think I was funny, so maybe that's why she started to call me at home after school on some days. Sam told me all kinds of stories about her, like how she used to make snacks for guys at the school, but then sprinkle Viagra all over them, or pour laxatives into them, so that anyone who ate it would suffer the brunt of her painful and arguably cruel joke. I just chuckled to myself and politely refused whenever she offered me anything. Then there was Rottenbacker. His real name was Jason, but everyone always called him Rottenbacker, or the Kraut, because he was a hardcore Nazi. He was an outcast and a loner. No one wanted to be associated with him. Every day he'd wear a red swastika armband to school, just beneath his jacket, where the teachers couldn't see. But whenever he'd get hot and slip it off, or whenever he was changing the locker room, he'd be wearing the Nazi armband. Furthermore, on Halloween and on school costume event days, when he knew he could get away with it, Rottenbacker always wore an entire replica of an SS uniform like the Gestapo wear, with the black hat and the long boots. He was a mean and angsty son of a bitch. Whenever anyone told a teacher about him or asked about the Nazi stuff, he'd shout racial or ethnic slurs at them and cuss them out and yell Heil Hitler. Furthermore, one peculiar thing that caught my eye was that I couldn't help but notice that Rottenbacker always walked with a slight limp, like he was in pain. Sam told me that somebody once saw him tightening a barbed silice in the locker room, like the ones the Catholic priests wear to punish themselves for their sins. It was a Catholic school, so I, like most people, just assumed at the time that maybe he just wore the silice because he's a devout Christian. It was kind of strange for a hardcore Hitler lover like Rottenbacker, but it was high school, and none of us preferred to think too much about stuff like that. After he got done introducing me to everyone, Sam told me some of the school's old stories, including an urban legend that circulated about Kaylee, a girl that died mysteriously after playing some sort of cell phone game. Sure enough, he could point out the girl in the yearbook to me, and everyone recalled that the police declared her missing under mysterious circumstances. She was presumed dead almost immediately thereafter. If you asked anyone exactly what happened, no one could tell you a damn thing. They always just said it was because she played the cell phone game. Sam, Stephanie, the cute, mischievous Asian, Rottenbacker, the self-torturing Nazi, the cell phone game, the police's investigation of a teen's disappearance. All these people and events were about to come together to drag me into something in which I wanted no part. It wouldn't even be until 2 years later that I finally understood how and why everything went down just the way it did. Anyway, the last half of the junior year came and went, and the long summer passed us all by in what seemed like a heartbeat. It was finally time to begin our last year of high school. Everyone was back for the new school year, pumped to start the laziest and most fun year of our high school lives. Even Rottenbacker, still limping around the school in that barbed silice, still spouting his Nazi garbage every time somebody decided to mess with him. The year started out eerily quiet. Word was that 2 more cell phone game related disappearances had happened over the summer to one boy and one girl from another high school, and that the police were investigating a possible serial killer. According to the paper, the only common link the police had found was that every person who disappeared had received a text message that read, "Welcome to the game." None of the text messages had been sent from the same cell phone, so this evidence had been dismissed as circumstantial. For me, things weren't half bad. It was this year when I finally started to open up more as a person. I had made a good circle of friends who I trusted and felt more calm about being myself at this point. Gradually, I started to fit in more and more, and pretty soon I was pretty popular in certain circles. Stephanie liked to hang around with me more and more because of how funny she thought my jokes were. Before long one day, which I still remember as one of the happiest of my life, she came to me in the middle of campus after school and looked up at me with this beautiful Asian eyes, that long black hair, and a smile to die for. And she asked me right then, "Jack, will you go out with me?" I laughed, ran, and jumped for joy. "Of course I will," I said, and danced around with her there in front of everyone. I finally had a girlfriend. I still remember that as one of the happiest days of my life, if not the happiest. We went on dates, we hung out after school, and she even started to eat lunch with Sam, Jim, Vogelman, and I every day. Maybe I wouldn't have been so happy had I known what was going to happen next. It was one day at lunch when she was sitting with us when she mentioned that while sleeping over with her friends one night, They had stayed up late with some girls from another high school talking about the cell phone game. She said that these girls knew about all the rules in the game, that they had explained it all to her in great detail. Supposedly, you can join the game at any time by sending a text message at midnight to the right phone number. The text message was supposed to say, "I wish for the power to curse." If you did it right, you would get a message in return that said, "Welcome to the game." And supposedly, this was the reason they had given for why the police found the message on the phones of everyone that had disappeared. Stephanie went on to talk about the game. We all listened attentively to what she was saying. She told us that once someone was in the game, they were in danger. Within 2 weeks, they had to complete one of a number of different tasks, or else they would be dragged away in the night. I stopped her right there. Dragged away? By what? To where? She got silent for a moment. "I don't know," she whispered, before continuing her story. She said that in order to protect oneself from being dragged away, you could one of two things. The first was to find a special, protective item. The item could be anything. You never knew what it was going to be, but it seemed that whatever the item was, it would make the bearer suffer in some way. This was considered a small price to pay in return for the protection for as long as you wore the item. The second way was to bring someone else into the game. This could be done by sending the text message, "Welcome to the game," to someone else's phone. If someone received the text message from someone else who was in the game, then that meant this person was now in the game too, and subject to all of the same rules and consequences of the game. If the person didn't find a protective item themselves, or bring another person into the game, then they too would be dragged away. The catch about the second was this: while the protective item, if found, could protect you indefinitely, so long as you kept it with you, bringing someone else into the game would only buy you a temporary grace period. The first time you brought someone into the game, you'd get a 2-week extension, then only 1 week. Eventually the grace period would be shorter and shorter, until you barely bought yourself any time at all by bringing someone else to the game. By that time, you needed to have found your protective item. Even though I've always been something of a /x/ file, I didn't like hearing her talk like about this stuff, so I told her it was a bunch of nonsense. "You really think so?" she asked. "If it's true, it would explain what the police found, and imagine how cool it would be to be able to pass that curse on to anyone who messed with you by bringing them into the game. You could get rid of anyone, and no one would ever know." There was an edge in her voice I'd never heard before from Stephanie. She almost sounded intoxicated at the thought of it. Truth be told, it scared me a little. "Don't go talking like that," I told her. "Stuff like that's beyond people like you and me. We shouldn't go messing with stuff like that. What if you got involved in it, and then it all turned out to be true? What would I do if something happened to you? Promise me you won't go messing around with that stuff." She gave me a funny look. "I never thought you would be the kind of person to be scared of silly things like this, Jack." "Well, I don't think it's right to mess around in stuff you don't understand, you know." I gave her a concerned look. "Now promise me, Steph. Promise you won't go try it?" She sighed in annoyance. Fine. I won't play the scary cell phone game. Are you happy now?" I told her I was, but truth be told, I was scared. I didn't believe her, and all the time I'd known her, I'd never seen her betray anyone, or sleep around or anything. But she had always been a trickster and a liar, and would lie to anyone about anything if it got her ahead, without hurting anyone else. But to be honest, I always thought it was kind of cute, and just accepted it as one of her quirks. But this time it was serious. So a few days later, when she came back and told us that she had joined the cell phone game, I was pissed. What were you thinking, Stephanie? You promised me you wouldn't do that. Yeah, I know. But it's not any big deal. I've already got it all planned. Besides, if it's true and it works, it's too good of an opportunity to pass up. She held up her cell phone. Look, she said. Giddily, a text message was open on the screen which read, "Welcome to the game." Kind of freaky, huh? I got it just after I sent the text message at midnight. Just like the girl said, my jaw dropped. I was speechless and scared stiff. This game couldn't be real, could it? Stephanie, if this is real, then you're in danger now. You've only got 2 weeks to find the protective item. I know. That's why I sent the text to Rebecca. I'm going to find out if it's true or not. I hit the roof. You did what? But Stephanie, if this is real, then that makes you as good as a murderer. You cursed Rebecca, and now she could die because of you. Relax, Jack. I don't actually believe any of this stuff. But even if I did, Rebecca's always been a big-time bitch. It's not like she doesn't have it coming anyway. She giggled the same mischievous giggle of hers, except it's about fucking murder. That I always loved, but this time I wasn't loving. Yeah. A couple weeks passed and nothing happened. But then one day Rebecca didn't show up at school. At lunchtime, Stephanie was sitting around with us, as usual, when the assistant principal came to talk to us at the megaphone. May I have your attention, please? Everyone got silent. The police have reported that one of your fellow students, Rebecca, has gone missing. Stephanie's golden skin turned white. She froze. Her parents are very worried about her. If any of you know anything about this, please come and talk to me after school. That is all. Stephanie, I whispered. I was very afraid for her. I was very afraid for what she might do. She looked at me and said, "Don't say anything, just don't." She got up and bolted from the lunchroom. I chased after. Stephanie, what are you doing? She kept jogging away from me, her cell phone out. Don't try to stop me, Jack. If I'm going to survive, I'm going to need more time. I can get another week if I curse someone else, and that'll give me 3 weeks to find it. Stephanie, listen to yourself. Who are you going to curse? Did you kill someone else for a little extra time? Look what's happened to you. She was starting to cry. I know, damn it. I know who I'm going to curse. No one's going to miss them, I promise. Stephanie, that's not right. You can't do it. No one deserves this. Let me help you. We can find a protective object for you together. She turned and showed me her cell phone. Her text outbox had a message which read, "Welcome to the game." She had sent it to Rottenbacker. I started to weep. I grabbed onto her as tightly as I could. Stephanie, I love you. I'm so sorry. This isn't right. None of this is right. She held on to me and began to cry deeply as well. We held each other there for nearly an hour like that. I still remember it like it was yesterday. Then that night before we went home, we both resolved we would start looking for a protective item the next day. The next day, I was walking with Stephanie along the track after school when Rottenbacker approached us with a cell phone. He was furious. He held it up to her face. Is this your idea of a joke, you stupid, slant-eyed bitch? Truth be told, I felt Rottenbacker had every right to be a little bit angry. Sure, he was a Nazi pervert freak, but with all the whispers of murder going around, I can imagine anyone being angry about getting a text like that. But even so, I wasn't about to let anyone talk to my girl that way. Hey, buddy, you want to watch your mouth? That's no way to talk to a lady. Lady, Rottenbacker shouted, this fucking slut is not a lady. She's just a bitch, and she tried to kill me. I bet you killed that other girl too, didn't you? Rebecca? She's missing because of you, isn't she? Stephanie began to cry. I pulled my arm back and punched as hard as I could at Rottenbacker's face. He stumbled backwards a few steps and grabbed at his lip, from which trickled a little stream of blood, but he kept his composure. I halfway expected him to swing back at me, but he just stood there. After a moment, he spoke. You just don't get it, do you, Stephanie? I'm already in the game. I always have been. I know the fucking score. When I like you, I never cursed anyone. Bullshit, I said. If that's all true, then how are you still... Suddenly I remembered the Silicea Rottenbacker wore around his leg that caused him to limp in agony, and what Stephanie had told me at lunch. Whenever a new protective item was discovered, whatever it was, it would cause its bearer to suffer. You're a protective item. You have one. Stephanie's eyes lit up. It was clear that it realized the same thing that I had. Rotten Batter smirked. That's right. So I just figured your girlfriend better know that she didn't get any additional time for trying to curse me. I've already been there and done that. Stephanie looked up at him with fear in her eyes. Days passed. Try as we might, Stephanie and I couldn't find anything that could qualify as a protective item. We were approaching the 2-week deadline, and she was looking more and more scared by the day. Her hair was a mess. Her usually bubbly personality was glum and distraught. She stared off into space during classes and prayed constantly. After the 2-week deadline passed, we were both terrified. She came to me at school and said, "Jack, I want you to sleep with me tonight. Stay with me all night. Don't let it get me." I couldn't refuse. I showed up at her house late that night and came in through her window. We slept together. It was bittersweet. She went to sleep holding me. I lay awake most of the night watching and waiting until I finally fell asleep at 4:30 in the morning from sheer exhaustion. The next day when I woke up, all I could think of was Stephanie. I looked around frantically, and she wasn't in bed next to me. "Stephanie," I said louder as I climbed out of bed and began to search for her. I walked into the kitchen. "Don't be so loud," a voice said. It was Stephanie's. I turned around to see her sitting at the round table in the kitchen. She was smiling and seemed giddy as ever. I breathed a sigh of relief. My parents have already gone to work, but I don't want the neighbors to get suspicious and say something. I wept with relief. It was over, and she was safe. Nothing had come for her. I ran across the kitchen floor and hugged her and kissed her. Everything was perfect for 2 weeks. Then I came to school one day, and 9 of our classmates had disappeared, including Sam. Not Sam. Everyone was in a uproar. No one knew what had happened to them or where they had gone. No one except for me and the person who had done it, Stephanie. If the amount of time extended was halved each time you brought someone into the game, then 9 people would have brought her just over 2 weeks, which meant that her time would be running out again tonight. I confronted her about it after school. "Stephanie, the police are getting suspicious. You can't do this anymore, and I can't watch you do this anymore. It's wrong. It's evil." She looked at me silently. I still remember the look in her eyes to this day. At this point, it had become clear to me that the girl I had known and loved was long gone, and all that remained was a soulless, wicked shell which clung to life and feared death more than anything. But even so, I still loved her more than anything. She was my first and only girlfriend, and I couldn't let her go. I couldn't let anything happen to her. "It's okay," she said. "I won't do it anymore. I've accepted what I need to do, and I'm going to do it. No one else is going to die because of me." "Stephanie, are you sure? Maybe we can still find a protective item if we look now." She looked down. "Sadly, there's no use in running from it now. I just want to spend the night with you tonight, okay? One more night together. That's all I want." I was heartbroken. Everything was too melancholic and too melodramatic. I was so sad at hearing her words, at the thought of her being taken away. I threw up, I vomited, I retched over and over into the nearby garbage can, trying to fight back an endless stream of tears. That night she slept with me again. Sick, weak and tired, I passed out in pure exhaustion at 3 a.m. Less than an hour later, though, I woke with a start. Stephanie was gone. I sat up and looked around in terror. Then I found a note and read, "Jack, I'm sorry for lying to you again, but I'm not ready to die yet." A chill went down my spine. I continued to read. "I figured out what I needed to do. Don't worry. As I promised, no one else is going to die because of me." What could she be thinking? I looked around my room. Suddenly I noticed that the .45 caliber pistol my father had bought me for my 18th birthday was missing from my room, and everything made perfect sense. That's why she wanted me to spend the night with me tonight. She wanted my gun. She was planning to go after Rottenbacker and take his protective item. As fast as I could, I threw on some clothes and bolted for my truck. I sped off toward Rottenbacker's apartment. When I got there, the lock had been shot off and there were voices inside. I pushed the door open. "What's going on here?" I demanded. I looked around, and Stephanie was holding Rottenbacker at gunpoint with my .45. The apartment walls were covered in pictures of Adolf Hitler and swastika banners. There were whips and chains scattered around the bedroom floor. Rottenbacker was stomping around in long-sleeved pajamas and cursing at her in his typical neo-Nazi form, screaming at her about home invasion and calling the police and this and that. He was even wearing that stupid Nazi armband. It was obvious this guy was a lunatic fanatic. Stephanie screamed at him, "Shut the fuck up." She fired a round at the wall behind him and winced. I remember my ears ringing from the loudness of the gunshot and a sharp pain in my inner ear, but I was too tense to worry about it at the moment. "Now give me that barbed torture thing you're always wearing, or I'll kill you right now." Her voice was all malice. Rottenbacker stood in place for a moment and slowly began to remove his pajama leggings. "You're making a big mistake," he said. "You should just accept the way things are and die with dignity. You're not going to get away with this." He removed the silicate from his leg, from which trickled a small amount of blood, and handed it to her. Immediately she slipped it onto her own leg with one hand, fumbling with the pistol as she tightened it until it hurt, and her own leg began to bleed a little. "Let's go, Jack," she whispered, and turned to leave. I started to walk out with her from the apartment. I heard Rottenbacker shouting, "You won't get away with this. He's going to come for you, and he's going to drag you off to hell for what you've done. You're going to pay for all those kids." I could see that she was sobbing a little as we walked away. I was sick. I was disgusted with everything. I was disgusted with Stephanie for being so cruel and selfish, and I was disgusted myself for seeing all of this, and seeing the signs and not doing anything to stop her. But at least now it would be over. As we walked back to my truck, I said a small prayer for Rottenbacker in the hopes that he could find a new protective item within 2 weeks. He may have been a racist bastard, but in a way, he was still better than Stephanie if what he said about never cursing anyone else was true. And he didn't deserve to die just for that. I drove Stephanie home. She was exhausted. I would have given her a kiss on the cheek, but I was too sick, and I just wanted the whole ordeal to be over. "Good night," I whispered to her. "Good night, Jack. I love you," she whispered back, and climbed out of my truck and went back to her house. I started to drive home, exhausted from the day's events. Suddenly, my cell phone began to vibrate. I picked it up. It was a call from Stephanie. I answered, "Hello?" The first thing I heard was a shriek, followed by what sounded like the noise of a pounding at her door. "Jack, help! He's here. He's here. He's here. And he's coming for me." "What? Hold on, Steph." I pulled a U-turn in my truck and sped off back toward her home. Stephanie was becoming more frantic. Suddenly, at the other end of the line, I heard the sound of her door being bashed in, followed by another shriek. I could hear Stephanie screaming at the top of her lungs. A hideous, blood-curdling scream. I still remember every moment of it perfectly, and I remember her screams word for word. "No, no, I don't want to die." Adrenaline surged through my heart, and I fled to the accelerator. "No, no, no, stop." She screamed again, and I heard what sounded like a phone hitting the floor, and Stephanie's screams getting further and further away, and then dead air. "Stephanie? Stephanie! Answer me, damn it!" Getting no response, I hung up and called the police. When I arrived at Stephanie's house, the front door had been bashed in. I parked my car on her lawn and jumped out, carrying my .45 caliber pistol with me. I ran inside, reaching the halls. Everything was in slow motion. Then I came to Stephanie's bedroom. I turned on the light and checked all the corners with my pistol leading all the way. At length I lowered my gun, and something caught my eye in the center of the room. Stephanie's cell phone lay on the floor next to her bed, and in the middle of the room in the carpet was a very small patch of blood. It wasn't more than a few drops, but the most chilling sight of it all was from the edge of her bed to the door of her room, which led out to the hall, was a trail of claw marks that she had left as something or someone had dragged her away to her doom. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and left her room. On the way out, I couldn't help but notice that she had torn out most of her fingernails, clawing at the carpet, that they had lay scattered near trails near her fingers had left. I went out into the street and threw up again. I could hear the sirens coming in the distance. Days passed, then weeks, then months. The police did investigations. They questioned me time and time again, and every time my stories were all the same. I told them the truth as I knew it, as unbelievable as it was. I don't think they believed me, but all the evidence supported my story, and there was nothing to implicate me in any of the crimes. So at length they finally let me go. Things gradually went back to normal. Our class eventually recovered from the losses of so many of our classmates, and over time, my mind kind of accepted what had happened until it seemed like a distant dream. I graduated and moved on to college, but there was one thing that still bothered me, though, through it all, and that was Rottenbacker. He had been exactly right. Even though Stephanie had taken his silice, he never vanished in the way that she had, and the others did. But there is one thing that I do know, and that is, to this very day, if you ever see Rottenbacker, he's still always wearing that red Nazi swastika armband. So yeah, the dude's not racist at all. He just has to pretend to be racist to not be attacked by demons. What kind of trade-off is that? He has to pretend to be a racist, or else demons will come for him. Yeah, the Nazi armband was the protective item. Later, guys.